So, as another year comes to a close, we are entering the holiday season. That's a time of giving, love, charity, being around those you care about most. But today we're going to talk about movies. And I've got a movie to talk about. It's for the ages. The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. It's a new Netflix original. I think it had a small theater run, but if you live in the Midwest like myself, you have to resort to watching it on Netflix. So that's what I did. Where do I begin? It's something else. But I guess you'd have to expect that from the Coen Brothers because they've had a great track record of movies, but they've also had a very unique track record of movies. They're one of a kind. There's not really any other directors out there like them. When you're watching a Coen Brothers movie, you know you're watching a Coen Brothers movie. Some of my favorite films are by these guys: Raising Arizona, Fargo, Oh Brother, Big Lebowski, countless others. And so after their last movie, Hail Caesar, which I actually did enjoy quite a bit, came to a lot of mixed reviews. A lot of people were on the fence about it because it didn't quite have that flair that most Coen Brothers movies do. And so when this film came out, people were kind of speculating which direction these directors would turn to. And personally, I would say it's in a positive direction. The Ballad of Buster Scruggs is an anthology film. Despite its title being named after the first story in the whole 6-part run, there's actually not just one story, there's several. And they're all, for the most part, really enjoyable. I think the most popular one was the first, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and so I'll start off right there. Probably the most lighthearted of the short films. The Ballad of Buster Scruggs follows a tale of this cowboy out in the Old West killing people in a very cartoonish, almost Looney Tunes fashion. He's a very Bugs Bunny type character. He has his own set of morals, and he goes by that code. And he basically just goes from town to town as a drifter, getting in gunfights, and he's like the quickest gun in the West. And so it's just kind of watching that adventure play out in this kind of wacky Wild West world they've set up. And so immediately watching that, it's hilarious and it's fun and it's really entertaining. And so it sets up this tone of, oh, okay, this is kind of going to be like a fun, fast-paced Western. But as the stories go along, you soon learn that's not true. And so we get to the next story, which follows James Franco's character. He's a bank robber, goes out to a bank that's literally in the middle of nowhere. I'm not sure what the business model on that one was. But he goes out there and he basically has a standoff with the banker. I won't ruin it, but it's one of the funniest parts in the whole movie. And then we basically see the aftermath of what happens to the bank robbing. This one was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it quite a bit because it was kind of like just a simple tale. It kind of reminded me of the type of movies you'd see like in cinema's early age, like early 1900s type films where it's just simple stories to kind of shoot. And it felt like an upscaled version of that. So it was a lot of fun. So this next one's called Meal Ticket, and this is probably the bleakest of them all as far as tone goes. Now, the first story in this movie, Ballad of Buster Scruggs, it was just a full-on dark comedy, laughing all the way through. The second one, it was a little darker, but it still had that comedic tone. This one is just dark. There's not much levity here. You're just following these two characters as they run their very dull, mundane business, and it's a rough one to sit through, but it's very enjoyable. And so what starts this one off is you're watching Liam Neeson's character run his town-to-town business, and his spectacle is a limbless man who tells stories and poems, one of which in particular that I caught was the poem of Ozymandias, which I thought was interesting, but they just keep doing that. They go from town to town to see various audiences, and it's rough because you kind of get the repetition of it all. There's no passion to it. There's a lot of it's pretty lifeless, and I think the way it was shot and the color grading they used really reflects that, because it's a bit of a downer. And by the end of the movie, you definitely are hit with a hard, shocking truth, and it makes for a shocking ending, but it sticks with you for sure. This one reminded me of a like just a straight up story you would either read out of a book or something like your parents would tell you. Like it just has that kind of spooky tone to it, and just kind of ends on a shocking downer. It just kind of rings true to a story you that would stick with you from childhood. Now the next story is called All Gold Canyon, and wow, this one is probably my favorite. It stars Tom Waits, but I think the real star of this movie, don't get me wrong, Tom Waits does an incredible job. I think the real star of this short is the landscape. Something I haven't talked about really in depth yet is the visuals of this movie. This short, it just looks the best. It really takes the visuals up a notch and shows what this movie has to offer on a cinematography level. It's just jaw dropping. Some of the landscapes that they show, it all looks so bright, vibrantly colored, and it's a nice escape from Meal Ticket's look, which was very dark gray, blue, and drab, which was intentionally done and looks nice, but it is good to escape that and kind of have just a view of beautiful nature. And so what this story focuses on is a miner, played by Tom Waits, who goes out into this country landscape with his little what was it? I think, yeah, he had a donkey, which was really funny. It wasn't a horse or an ox or anything like that. He's just pulling this little donkey along with him on his journey, and they dig for gold. And something that was cool about this movie was it had just one character played by Tom Waits, unless you want to count the donkey too. But it was interesting because it showed the painstaking process of mining, but it did so in such an enthralling way. It was just interesting to see that process play out. And that sounds like it would be very boring to watch, but it actually ends up being one of the most engaging shorts in the whole film, in my opinion. Through Tom Waits' performances, the beautiful visuals, and just kind of the sheer dedication his character has, it makes this one very fun to watch. There's an interesting twist and turn at the end, and I really think it brings it home as my favorite short of this whole film. And now for the penultimate in this series of anthology films, The Girl Who Got Rattled. This one, as far as pace goes, it's probably the slowest burn, but I do think it's a very, very strong story. The performances, I think, are the standout for this one for me. It follows the story of a young woman who goes out to travel on the Oregon Trail to change her life and get married. And I think the funniest part of that setup is the person she wants to get married to has no idea who she is. And along the way, she forms a bond with one of the heads of the trail, and who's been running the Oregon Trail for years with his partner, and she actually falls for him, and they start to grow a bond together. And so that's where the heart of this movie comes from. Something that I love about the Coen brothers is that not only are they experts on dialogue, I think their writing is probably their strongest suit as far as writing interesting stories, but also giving characters interesting things to say. That on its own is enough, but they go a step further, and whenever they capture a time period, they really do their homework, and they're such sticklers for detail and making sure what their characters are saying is accurate to that time period. And I think that's most well executed here. Now, the last story is called The Mortal Remains. This is an interesting one. It's the final story of this anthology of movies, and by the time I got to it, I was kind of sad because I was like, wow, like this movie's already over. But they saved a good one for last. This movie it's unique because of its setup. Very simplistic. It's 6 characters from different social statuses stuck together in one wagon train, going from who knows where to a hotel. So they're making a trip home. They all have their own reasons. Some want to return to see loved ones. Others just want to go for business. And it's interesting to see these characters interact. Now, what's weird about this one is it all takes place, for the most part, in one wagon train. If you've seen the movie Locke starring Tom Hardy, that whole movie takes place in his car. He's just driving, talking to himself. Simplistic and very mundane setup, but through execution, it's made interesting. Something I found really cool to watch throughout this movie was as the characters are having their discussion in the wagon train, and as time is passing, the lighting is slowly changing from a bright daylight to a darker blue night tone. And it's something you don't really notice as it's playing along because it's so subtle and so slow, but it gets to a certain point and you're like, whoa, they just completely changed the lighting and thus the whole mood of this piece. And this one really does show what the Coen brothers can do with limited resources. And it leaves you satisfied. What's interesting about this movie is a lot of anthology films have a through line. One that comes to mind is the horror film Trick or Treat. It all takes place on one Halloween night, and there's stories that don't seem to connect aside from tiny details, but the through line of it is the little pumpkin head character. I think his name's Sam. So he's the through line. He's what pulls the whole thing together. And if you're watching this movie, right away it might not seem like there's a through line, anything connecting all these pieces, but by the end you definitely realize that it's not an overt thing. It's not really something you can see, but it's a theme. And I think the theme is death, whether it be shown in a positive light, like death being a change, or a happy end to a satisfying life, or if it's something more tragic, like a sad loss or a life gone too soon, stuff like that. It varies through the stories, but it's always really interesting and compelling. This Ballad of Buster Scruggs movie I enjoyed quite a bit. I think it's probably one of the Coen brothers' best, especially as of recent. I've seen it a couple times through, and I'd like to see it again. If I had to rank these shorts, I'd probably do it in this fashion. But they were all great. I think this movie's a lot of fun. If you like Westerns, you should definitely check it out. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about this movie. It was a lot of fun. Always great to see a new Coen Brothers movie. So yeah, definitely check this one out. And that's all I have to say. Like I said, the holiday season, you gotta stay busy seeing family and stuff. So that's what I'm gonna do. Cut. Oh, is this still recording?